Let us get started. Hello and welcome everybody to Phoenixville Library, those of you in our community room and those of you out in Zoom land. For tonight's presentation, we are pleased to have with us Pam Baxter, who you may know from her weekly newspaper column in the local papers. Pam has also written for the American Horticultural Society's American Gardener magazine and the Philadelphia Inquirer, and was the editor of the award-winning newsletter of the Valley Forge Audubon Society for 24 years. In addition to gardening and writing, Pam enjoys playing and teaching cello, hiking, and cooking with the vegetables that come out of her organic garden. Those of you on Zoom, please keep yourselves muted during the presentation. If you want to ask any questions, put them into the chat. At the end, you'll have a chance to unmute yourselves and ask. So, all that aside, let us welcome our guest, Pam Baxter.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. This is so cool, and thanks to all of you on Zoom. I think you can see me.
Yep.
Is now a good time to, Mark asked me if I was okay if you have a question you want to ask in the middle, and I think that's fine. Zoom people, if you have a question, just note it, and we'll catch up with those later. So, we'll get started. Possibly the best gift I ever got as a young girl was a pair of knee-high, fake fur-lined, waterproof vinyl boots. Not these. I found this picture online. These cost $5.75 from some store. But the best gift because they meant that I could explore a little stream near our house from in the stream, especially in winter. I was out there. And that's just to illustrate that I had the nature bug back about as far as I can remember. I spent as much time as I could outside, exploring, looking at, and finding out about everything nature has to offer, especially the little quiet things. Things I hadn't heard about or seen in books, or things that I had read about in books that I was eager to see. For instance, caddisfly houses. Have you ever picked up a stone in a river and found those? It took me, I was somewhere in my 20s before I found a stream that had those in it. And by the way, French Creek in Phoenixville. Anyway, I just wanted to see all these things for myself, and things I realized others might walk past without even noticing. Over the years, I've come across and learned about many things in the wild, but it wasn't until recently that I started thinking differently about what I was seeing. It was only about 10, maybe 12 years ago that I found that nature is like a giant walk-in self-help book, if you know how to see it and interpret it. I found guidance on things like self-acceptance, setting and achieving goals, coping with loss, and adjusting to this quickly ever-changing world. So here's an example. I'm assuming some of you know what these are. Just pass it around. I'm sure it gets over to Steve. Somebody said black walnut. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we happen to have a black walnut tree in our backyard. These things are all over the place. Have you ever tried to get the meat out of a black walnut?
No, I've heard of
Okay. You've had success?
No.
Some years ago, a neighbor of mine, she collected a big sack of these things. I think she'd already done the driving over them with a car to get those fleshy hulls off them, and then had this sack of these very rough things. Put them in a vise to crack them open, hit them with a hammer. By the time we were done a couple hours later, we had a big pile of shell fragments and a little bit of little tiny nut pieces, little crumbs. So coming across these shells, having that experience, trying to get the dang nuts, which are really delicious, out of the shells, got me thinking. As humans, we have these amazing brains, we've got these amazing hands, dexterous fingers, the famous opposable thumb. We can do complex math, we can play musical instruments, we can put people in a spaceship, shoot them out there, and they land on the moon. So many things we can do, a lot of things we can't. Squirrels, little creatures with little tiny brains, can do that. They can hollow these things out, get every last speck of meat, and leave just that smooth, polished, beautiful interior. So here is nature handing me a simple but brilliant life lesson. There are things I can do, things that I can't. it's a little obvious, but I'll never be able to process a walnut the way a squirrel can. I beat myself up over it. And from there I could see a bigger picture about things that are more directly connected to my life. I know the thinking today is anything you put your mind to and really want to do, you can achieve. I don't personally think that's true. The walnuts help remind me of that. And I actually haven't found a piece of advice in that regard as helpful as the message I got from the walnut shell. And once I had that initial insight, I kept stumbling over more and more of them. I ended up putting 31 messages into Big Life Lessons from Nature's Little Secret. I wrote this for kids about 8 to 12, and it includes things like being prepared, a message I got from seeing magnolia buds in the winter, how to look before you leap and make good decisions. Don't just go out and pick a big bouquet of skunk cabbage leaves. Your mom may reject you at the front door and put you in the tub for a big scrub afterwards. So today I want to tell you a little bit about how I started coming to awarenesses like these and how I came to write about them. Share some of the little things, the events, coincidences even in my life that inspired to make me a writer. And ultimately leading me in a direction where I could share what I saw and thought with others. And we'll also, a little later on, explore at least one section of the book and give you a chance to think and talk about it. So, looking back, I think my interest in nature has just always been a part of me inherently. The first actual specific up-close and personal encounter that I had with something in nature that I remember is from my daily walk to school one winter morning. School's about a quarter of a mile from our house. And I found, coming up out of the mud, these beautiful crystals of ice. And this, I actually had a different slide one I found online, and then this morning I was out in the yard in some muddy patches and I felt that crunch underneath my feet and I went to dig up and boom, so that's my own photo from this morning. Do you know, have you seen this? It's called needle ice. The mud is warmer than the air. It draws up by capillary action and the water forms into ice crystals and keeps bringing it up and up. Anyway, I was entranced by this and I grabbed some leaves and wrapped up a chunk of those crystals and ran the rest of the way to school and burst into my 4th grade classroom. And to her credit, Mrs. Rosenquist whipped out a magnifying glass so I could see them better. She looked at them and invited the class to come up before these things melted completely away.
Bravo for Mrs. Rosenquist.
Absolutely, yeah. She was like my best teacher ever. A little side note, in thinking back about that event, I realized that sharing what I noticed in nature was always important to me. I wanted others to have these experiences. I mean, everybody else, there were a lot of us walking to school, everybody else walking right by and saying, look at this school thing. So I realized I was blessed with the perfect parents for this interest. My dad grew up in West Philly in the early 1900s and would escape the row house, as he told, just about as often as he could for Fairmount Park. He was very athletic, loved the physicality of being out in nature. I'm pretty sure, like me, he was also a serious introvert and loved the quiet of being out in nature. He took us hiking at every opportunity. We happened to live about 4 miles from Sleeping Giant State Park, just north of New Haven, Connecticut. And this thing has bog, it has a river, it has cliffs. This is a basalt ridge. There's a couple others in this part of the state. And it also comes with a Native American legend from the Quinnipiac Indians who originally lived in that area. This had been the evil spirit Hobomok, who was put into eternal sleep by another spirit. My dad also wondered a lot about the why and how of things. We were invited to a friend's cottage in Maine, our whole family, one summer, and along one side of the building was a big bed of daylilies. And my dad said, Pam, they're called daylilies. Do you think that's accurate? Do they really just bloom for one day? So he got a bunch of string, cut them into pieces, tied a string around several of the stalks, 5 or 6 that were in bloom. And then first thing the next morning popped out, sure enough, they had started to wilt. We also occasionally, and I brought, this is a 1920-something microscope that was my dad's, we'd go down to a pond near our house with a bucket at least a few times in the summer, come back, put some drops of water on the slide and see what was swimming around. My mom also loved being out in nature, but she approached it more from beauty and creativity. We would take so many walks, just she and I don't know where my other siblings were, but especially in spring, we'd go out on daily walks and see what was cropping up in a little wild area near our house, where we would find things like skunk cabbage and jack in the pulpit, and just take a look at what was coming up out of neighbors' gardens and celebrating things like just a little hint of what's coming up in a few weeks. She'd sometimes pack a tote with sketchbooks, charcoal pencils, and boxes of pastels, pack us all in the car and drive us somewhere to find something sketch-worthy. So with both parents, we were out tromping in nature and also sitting quietly, just absorbing it all, experiencing with our bodies, our minds, and our spirits, and giving me plenty of opportunities for nature to seep into my being. Moving on a little farther, there was always more I wanted to learn, especially about plants. In college, I took botany classes, plant taxonomy. Following my college boyfriend to Philadelphia, living in Center City and feeling way too far from nature, I started studying landscape design at Temple's Ambler campus, having the idea that maybe I could, if I got a degree in landscape design or landscape architecture, I could help transform some of these bleak urban spaces. It wasn't a really good fit, just as a side note. It still kept me too far from nature. I took refuge in filling our Center City apart with houseplants. We later bought a house in Grace Ferry. I don't know if you've ever been in that part of South Philly. It's pretty funky. It was there that I started my first vegetable garden, big plastic tubs on the back porch. And then after about 10 years, we moved out to Kimberton, where I still live now after 40 years. I suddenly had a big yard, hedgerows of mature trees, and plenty of space for a vegetable garden. That's my son when he was about 7 or 8, and plenty of wildlife to observe. Along with opportunities for big adventures like hiking to the top of Mount Katahdin in Maine, the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, and trekking in Nepal, the shadow of the Himalayas. There were so many things to notice closer to home. I watched a mud dauber wasp build her nest, and I actually, the container that I had it in and was going to pass around so I could show you somewhere at home. I watched a toad shed its skin and eat it. It's the coolest thing. It splits open down the back, and then with its legs, it sheds it and just stuffs it in its mouth, not wasting any opportunity for food, I guess. And I could not find that in any. I actually ransacked this library, the children's section, and finally found one book. It was printed in like 1952 or something, black and white, and I finally found a mention of this molting process that toads go through.
Who knew?
And I've also had the opportunity to watch a butterfly larva form its chrysalis. And I just want to, just because it is like the, so it's more than the garden, just want to pause here for a minute, because the thing with the caterpillar was just the coolest thing. And I used to, generally happens in fall, September, usually in October, when black swallowtail larvae are on our rue plants, and they get predated so much that I will often take some in, and that's rue, and they just chow down on that stuff like crazy. Just want to take you through this cycle a little bit. So, have any of you ever done this? Raised butterflies or anything? The funny, it's such a cool thing with the black swallowtails. When they know it's time to form their chrysalis, they walk off the host plant. I'll never see them again. I never have. And they find a quiet place where they hang in this sort of comma shape. And the thing I want you to notice is this little thing right here, that little filament. So I was going to say, if you're squeamish about insects, don't look. I'm sorry the quality of these photos, this is from about, actually it was during COVID, it's a bunch of years ago. But what happens is, so the very first thing, here's that, this is a different caterpillar, but he's still in that comma shape, and you can see that little filament. And sitting out that one night, I knew I'd found him in that comma shape, and I said, he's gonna form a chrysalis tonight, and I set my alarm for like every 10 minutes. I doze off, wake up, and come back, and finally was there. From that place where he's just curved up in that comma shape, I realized he was moving his head around like this and back and forth, and I finally realized he was spinning out this filament. It turns out these things have spinnerets just as spiders do. And made this little thing. Then he finally had to work his head underneath it, and had this sling around sort of his back. But just keep that in mind. Then the weird, this is like so sci-fi, it's ridiculous. I always thought that a caterpillar morphed into a chrysalis, or made like more of a cocoon or something. The skin split open. This chrysalis thing was inside it. I was like alien, just this thing.
Oh my gosh.
So here's the very first stage. The top left, I'm sorry, I couldn't get it to go the way I wanted to. More of the skin is coming off, and here, just this last little shred. And I don't know how they know to do this. That thing, this chrysalis kept wriggling until it had sloughed off that last little bit of the skin. And then there it was, just hanging. It already changing shape, and by the time they get a little more mature, like after a couple of days, you can almost see the shape of wings in there. But here's this little filament, still there, keeping it supported the whole time. So, anyway, that was obviously an event that really spoke to me, and I put it in the book. We'll get to that later. So, pursuing that love of nature is really what got me started in writing. Here's how it started. With a really odd challenge from my grandmother. She put a $10 bill into an envelope for each of us grandkids with a challenge. Here's $10, she said. I want you to use this for God, for country, for others, and for self. I'm thinking, Grandma, what are you doing? Even if I took out the for self part, because I didn't really care, that's roughly $3.33 for God. I can put that in the collection plate at church. That's going to help a lot. Something for country, what would that be? Something for others? I don't know, find a homeless person. But I got an idea. Our next door neighbors had 4 young kids. I babysat there a lot. That's kind of what funded me through junior high and high school. And they happened to be members of National Audubon Society. And when the kids were asleep, I'd go find that month's issue of the magazine and read and just soak that in. And I really wanted to become a member of National Audubon. But it cost $18 whole, which today seems ridiculous, but I didn't have it. But I had Grandma's $10 and an idea. I said, Grandma, could I add $8 to your 10, make 18, join National Audubon Society? If you believe that God made the natural world, the earth and everything on it, that's something for God. If you believe that preserving our open spaces, our natural lands, is good for art, that's something for country. If you believe that the people of America should have spaces that they can enjoy, that's something for others, and something for me because I really want to be a member of Audubon. Okay, so if you're keeping up with me, you might be wondering, how does that connect with writing? When I first moved to Philadelphia, I just found suddenly I was a member of Valley Forge Audubon Society. When I was a member up in Connecticut, I had never gotten any correspondence from anybody. All of a sudden, I'm getting newsletters, And first they needed a publicity chair, so I could do that. I did, and then I noticed that the newsletter, while interesting, had lots of wasted space. They could put more into it. Raised my hand, could I do your layout for you? And then I ended up becoming the editor as well. And every now and then, every few months, I'd end up with 2-3 inches of empty column space, and instead of throwing in a piece of random clip art, I'd write a paragraph or 2. Got a call from a person who was also a member of the Valley Forge Audubon Society and was an outdoor writer for a newspaper in Lancaster and some other publications. He said, could I interview you for my column? Sure, fine. So at the end of the interview, this guy, John, says, you're a really good writer. I've read your little pieces in the newsletter. He said, you write professionally? I said, no, how would I do that? I said, You pick up the phone, you call the daily local news, you tell them you're a writer and see if they have any work for you. I did. And they started sending me out on assignments, which I have to say was one of the coolest things because it got me out into a community that I hadn't really had much interaction with, like the Westchester School District Summer Science Program. Just eat that up. Science nature. About 4 months into that, my editor called and said, Pam, we've been thinking about starting a column on home vegetable gardening. Do you know anything about growing vegetables? I said, I actually do. Anyway, that was 26 years ago. I still write for the Daily Local. So that's half of the story of getting into writing in these books. Parallel to that writing that I was doing, I took a job as Sunday school director for the Unitarian congregation in Westchester. And just for fun, I started writing these monthly nature notes for the kids, hoping to get them a little out of their devices, out of the house, and taking a different look at what's outside. And this is where the shift happened. As I paid more attention to what I was seeing with the kids in mind, and spent more time thinking about it, and spent time writing about these things, I started seeing these things a little differently. Suddenly nature was yielding up new ideas and perceptions. And as I mentioned, big life lessons emerged from that. So, water. Any questions on anything?
How old were you when your grandmother gave you this challenge?
16, 17?
Okay. Wow.
I might have missed slides. I think that's involved talking. Did I miss slides? No. Okay. So let's get into the book. There's one chapter in particular that I want to share with you. And actually, I'll read first and then I'll pass out. I'm hoping that you'll work with me, and I brought some little notebooks and pencils. There's questions that are, have any of you read the book? Part of it. Part of it. Okay, so you know there's questions that I posed at the end of the section. It's a way of kind of extending the experience and getting a little more thought to happen, so I'll pass those out in a minute. If there is time, I'll read a second one, but let's just get to this. $10 bill just doesn't look very. Let's go back to questions. So you remember, because we just, it's perfect. This section is called A Lesson from a Caterpillar, Creating a Support System. It was late at night and the house was asleep, except for me and the black swallowtail caterpillar in the habitat I'd set up for it in an old aquarium. Looking over from my snug spot on the sofa, I noticed that the caterpillar, which had been immobile since earlier in the day, was still in the same spot, but was now moving, arching its head back and forth. I got up to see what was happening and discovered that I'd managed to catch the caterpillar in the act of making the sling from which it would later hang as a chrysalis. A black swallowtail doesn't go directly from larva to pupa. Before that transformation, the caterpillar makes itself a little harness that attaches to the surface of a carefully chosen spot. That's what I was now witnessing in the near-dark living room. The larva moved its upper body back and forth from left to right and back again, spinning out barely visible silken threads from its spinnerets. I watched as it laid down dozens of these threads, making an almost impossibly thin strand. After several minutes of this, the larva began to stretch the fine cable and then worked its head and upper body under the sling until the loop was wrapped around its back. Finally, it settled in and was still again. No more movement. 2 nights later, after hours of constant watching and waiting, I got to witness the caterpillar split out of its skin, revealing the chrysalis beneath. Through the entire bizarre process, which only takes 8 minutes or so, the sling remained intact. The chrysalis will remain suspended by the sling through the winter and early spring until it emerges as a butterfly sometime next May. I was blown away by this, and it got me thinking. And all the attention that's placed on the transformation of caterpillars to butterflies, we've all heard this, using that as a metaphor for personal transformation and how challenging and sometimes painful transformation can be, I've never heard anybody mention what happens before. That the larva makes a supportive sling for itself. As I thought about this, I wondered, in the really rough times in our lives, what is our support? What holds us fast as we struggle and morph again and finally break out of our old skin? I realized that for me, it starts with my family, friends, prayer, that then goes beyond to playing music, writing, being in nature. I find myself wondering, is a support system something that we instinctively create for ourselves? Are there invisible supports we create that we're not even aware of? Practices, habits, rituals? So I'm going to invite you to take a few moments to reflect. And if you would grab a notebook and a pencil, just hand it around. And I'll read the questions while these are going around. I'll also put them up on the screen so you don't have to remember the questions. And if you don't, if none of these questions really resonate for you, if you just kind of think about the general idea of a support system, or if anything else came up for you while thinking about, oops. So 3 questions. Who or what holds you when you feel immobilized by life, by anxiety, loss, grief, traumatic change? If you haven't felt support when you needed it, how can you create it so it's there when you do? And with support in place, can you relax and trust and let your life unfold?
Thank you.
It's about 5 minutes. That's how long this recording is. Right?
So we need to.
Pam, you live in Kimberly and you have a vegetable garden. How do you keep from just having it decimated by deer? I thought I saw a fence in the back.
That's the original fence, and that keeps groundhogs, rabbits, and squirrels out. The deer can go over that. The thing I've resorted to is those super lightweight spun bonded float grow covers. And I just drape those over the plants or with support. They don't have hands, they can't get, they'll just anchor with some branches or bricks or something. Yeah.
I had to put under spring soap on the bushes so that kept them away. And then yeah. Doing soap on the bush.
feel very teacherish. How was that for everybody? Anybody feel like you want to share any of your thoughts? Yeah, Susan.
I will. What I wrote was, from the beginning, was family. It's talking about who supported you, et cetera, what holds you, makes you feel immobilized by that. From the beginning was family, now friends. I was fortunate enough to be churched. Then I went to camps actually, that helped me to learn independence and caring for others. At camp, being kind was huge and rewarded only after very hard work. And for the second one, I read a lot and look for wisdom from others. And the last portion is yes. With that support in place, yes, I can.
I'll share something. Think about somebody. It could go either way tonight. You share or not share. Interesting experience. I just kind of, you browse YouTube and YouTube pops up stuff, and something sort of out of the ordinary popped up. It was this kid. He's obviously a YouTuber, and it seems that the thing he enjoys doing, or sort of is his niche, is finding popular music that he hasn't heard yet. And he'll put on his headphones and listen to it, and you get to watch his reaction listening to this for the first time. He said, "Hey folks, somebody's been suggesting this Bridge Over Troubled Water by this Simon and Garfunkel. I don't know who they are. I don't even know like what era they sang in." He said, "I think my grandmother might have listened to that or something."
Probably.
But he said, "Here we go," and you can probably find it if you want to. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but it was so interesting. It was obvious that he was expecting something completely different. Because even just through that piano, that keyboard introduction, all of a sudden his face changed. And then the vocals started. And I thought I was just burst into tears. And I listened, I haven't heard that song forever, but I realized it's exactly what this is talking about. And life just got really crazy, like yesterday, and it's really easy to feel at sea. What do you hold on? And the message in that song, just I started to cry. But that plus, knowing that I was going to be coming here this evening and seeing a couple faces, hopefully, that I did know, but a lot of faces that I don't know, and sharing some of myself with you all, and in this way, hopefully building a little community. So it all seemed to kind of wrap together. This wasn't one of the ones I was going to do tonight, and then that Bridge Over Troubled Water got to me, and I put those slides, those photos together of the caterpillar. I said, yeah, we're definitely doing that one. So yeah, those threads, that sling that the caterpillar makes, the threads of connection we make, and we might not even know a connection was made until years later. Anybody else come across anything you'd like to share? Yeah. Or
Mine, for the first one, was very similar to the person who spoke. But for the second one, I always think of Mr. Rogers, who said, always look for the helpers. And so I always reach out to people who have the same passions that I have, or they have the same feelings, the same perspective that I do. And I kind of pull them in, and I feel like I can tell who they are just kind of by talking and listening to them. So that's what I wrote about finding support.
thanks so much for sharing that, because that's so important. Sometimes you share something really important to you, and you can tell it's just not going anywhere with the person you're talking to. Them again. Yes, Suzanne?
I'd like to comment on that because Mr. Rogers wasn't exactly top of the list when I don't even think he was on TV when I was a child, to be honest with you, I'm so old. But I have a bookmark with his face on it that I'm using as a reminder of just the things you're talking about. And years ago at a college reunion, Mr. Rogers was from Pittsburgh. And one of the gals in my college class was from Pittsburgh. And to this reunion, it was a small group that met in Cape May, which is not where I went to college, but we decided to meet in Cape May. And there were maybe 15 of us. And she brought us a book, each of us a book about Mr. Rogers and his life and how he became who he was. And what an instrument in the world he is and was, because he still is.
Well, this kind of, when you started talking, I thought, please don't say Mr. Rogers wasn't as great as you all think he was. Which just plays into my cynicism with the world right now.
He was.
Because I was like, no, not Mr. Rogers.
He was an amazing,
Yeah,
amazing.
because everything I've ever heard about him,
Yeah.
and we watched him growing up, but he was just an amazing person. And so when I think back to my childhood, I think back to Mr. Rogers all the time, and I was like, no, please don't.
Well, if I can, I know I have the book, and I'll pass it on to you, and then you can touch base and give you the name of the book, because she said it was a Pittsburgh thing, because everybody loved Mr. Rogers, and it was something that they wanted to share with the rest of the world.
I thought the
And you
same
didn't
thing.
get
It's
it.
like, don't say it. I
I didn't think you wanted it.
This makes me think of something. I think some of us are past middle age, let's say.
Yes.
And like it started occurring to me in context of Mr. Rogers that we have so many more opportunities to be the helpers as people who've weathered stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And, know that, cycles happen and keep the, I don't say keep the faith, it sounds very trite, but just with that experience of, I'm trying to remember what context this was in. This was years and years ago. In a tough situation, like say a life and death situation, like say people are marooned on an island, I'm just drumming that up. The people more likely to come out of that alive are the older people, even if they're physically infirm, because they've weathered so much. And young kids might think this is the end. I've never been in this horrible situation, can't see a way out, and they lose hope.
That's actually what I wrote about the top one, that, and I think it does come with age, that what holds me when I feel, immobilized, is a belief that things will get better, and it doesn't stay bad forever. And I think that does come just from, when I try to tell this to my son, who's 28, that, life is up and it's down, and sometimes it's really down, but it goes back up. It doesn't stay down forever. And it can feel that way when you're in it, but things will ebb and flow.
I feel like for young kids, well, it's rainy today, but remember it was sunny yesterday, and take a look at the weather forecast, it's gonna be sunny the day after tomorrow. Just on that smaller scale for younger children, where you really don't like what I cooked you for dinner tonight, but you're probably gonna like tomorrow. So, Mark, what would you say? Go through another reading or wrap it up at this point?
Oh,
Time-wise.
Can probably do another reading, sure.
Okay, super. And these things actually, I think, go kind of hand in hand. So. And Mary Ann, I mentioned to you when I saw you the other day at the petition signing, your garden features in a chapter of this book.
What is it? I have to share, please.
I hadn't seen my friend Mary Ann for a while. As I approached her house, I found her street side garden abundant with spider plants and clematis.
Okay.
This chapter is titled Crouching Gardener, Hidden Spider. Seeing our own beauty. A flicker of gold caught my eye as I picked wilted daylily blossoms off their stems. I looked closer and saw a spider barely half an inch long, crouched in the cup of one of the bright orange flowers still fully open. The spider's tiny body was iridescent gold, like one of the priceless artifacts sealed up in King Tut's tomb. An unmistakable defensive posture that kept the spider facing me as I moved told me that the spider knew I was there, observing it from all angles. The spider's beauty captivated me. and I wondered what kind it was. What was its scientific name? There are so many spiders in the world. Had anyone ever seen this one before? Probably. But my mind was mostly occupied with wondering why the spider was so lavishly adorned. What purpose did the brilliant, glinting gold cover serve? Here was this small member of the arachnid family out trapping food and doing whatever else spiders do during the day. Regardless of what it was up to, I'm certain that the spider had no idea of its beauty and could not comprehend that someone would stop to notice it as being worth more than just a quick sniff. Who knows, perhaps the moment with the spider was just to catch my attention, for me to be more fully present. Maybe the moment was to let me see a spider as something other than scary. Only a few of us live highly noticeable lives, winning a gold medal, writing a bestseller, finding a cure, brokering peace, having thousands of followers on social media, or captivating audiences from the silver screen. Yet how many of us live our lives with integrity, sincerity, determination, fortitude, tenderness, grace, generosity? Most of us are quiet stars, shining brightly and beautifully in our corner of the world, just like the spider I noticed that day, gleaming in stunning beauty in a daylily blossom. I find myself wondering, using external mirrors to judge ourselves tends to reflect back to us only what is superficial. How can we peer into the blossom of our actual self to see the gold within? So the questions I posed for this: what parts of yourself do you think are beautiful? Consider your interior self, not your exterior image. What parts do you think others see and respond to? What do you hope people see when they look at or interact with you? Consider the possibility that on any given day, you just might be the beautiful thing someone needs to see. Would you like birdsong or wind in the mountains?
Wind in the mountains.
Comment from Zoom, what a lovely passage about the gold spider.
about a minute left if you're still reading.
Eileen on Zoom says hello from Edmonds, Washington.
She's also a gardener, and she and her husband moved from Westchester to Washington, I don't know how many years ago at this point, but she has sent back photos of the garden that came along with the house that they bought. Fruit, blueberries, all the different kinds of berries, beautiful shrubs and stuff, and yeah.
I think they have the weather for it that we don't have.
Yeah. I felt more and more challenged here with our, you mentioned the deer, and just. So I'm sorry, I got caught up in what's coming. Anything anyone would like to share about reflecting on this section? It's just kind of slow.
I'd like to reflect on the process of this, which I think is interesting. I forgot about that when you're journaling, that like if you read the questions, you have an answer in your mind. When you start writing, it comes out differently, and it's just amazing how you can think of it differently as you're physically writing it. So I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. And that's such a great observation. I don't know if I would have thought, I mean, I've been journaling since I was like 10 years old. And, you know, as I think mentioned before, you know, when I was writing those nature notes for the kids, and when I started writing about these things that I was seeing, and how could I maybe capture their attention, it got me thinking in a whole different way. I mentioned that I found Nature's kind of like a giant walk-in self-help book, and I've actually picked up my own book from time to time and found help there. And I kind of wish I didn't read this over and over again preparing for tonight. It's like, damn, I should have. It was hard standing up here. It's like, you know, I don't know most of you. It's like, what are people going to think of me? You know, too tall, too short. You know, piece my hair's, you know, whatever people choose to focus on. And, yeah, so that was interesting.
Well, it's clear your thoughtfulness comes through.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually when you come to author talks like this, it's the audience asking you the questions and you are asking us to consider these questions.
Yeah.
So it's a very different experience than most authors.
Was it a good experience?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm thinking
I'm not
most people,
sharing
I think,
anything I wrote, but
no,
yeah.
that's fine. I think most people come, you just kind of want to sit and
Yeah.
soak
No,
up.
this
I
is
think
great.
I'm going to make them work. But hopefully just going to touch something new through this.
Well, before I forget, you must give Pam your name so that she can get in touch with you about Mr. Rogers' book once I find it, okay? Or you can give it to me if you.
Okay.
One thing I forgot to
Actually,
mention,
that
I
would be
did,
better, then we don't have to go.
If you'd like, you don't have to, but if you'd like, you can take one of my business cards. There's a QR code on here that'll take you to my website. And if you want, I've been pretty much doing it for 2 years, writing a monthly newsletter called Rambles, Things I See When I'm Out in Nature and Think About. They might not always be the most thoughtful. Are you two together?
Oh, I love your card. I think you need to start designing cards too.
I took it before we were started. I got it.
Oh my God, that's a design, I think it's right from Vistaprint. I just had to find it, and I think it's beautiful for a botanically oriented
Yeah.
person.
You know, what I like about that first one is it's really something, because you're not talking about the color of our hair or the color of our lipstick or anything. I'm in the theater, a lot of people know that, I'm a performer, I come from the beauty pageant world, from what my son would call the olden days. All of that emphasis on exterior appearance. So to look into yourself, and what about your spirit? What about your optimism? And an older, what about your determination? You know, and that's some, you know, like you really had to think about yourself, not the exterior that people see. Because quite often what they see on the outside is really not what is really going on the inside.
And I think we're trained to, like, you go to school, you take a test, that's wrong, that's wrong.
Mhm.
I think the educational system has improved a lot in terms of encouraging children, but I'm a musician, I played cello since I was 10, and it's fabulous, I've not traded that in for anything, I'm still playing. But it's all about, you know, your teachers hearing what's not right and making the corrections. So
Right.
there's that constant thing. I teach, and it's like I have to really work hard to not destroy a child's sense of self-worth in saying,
Yeah.
you know, this could be this. I played it right. Yes, and. What's that?
Said, try the tubo or something.
Anything else anybody wants to share or any questions?
Anybody on Zoom care to chime in? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Have you read Rachel Carson's The Sense of Wonder?
Mhm.
Yeah. This is reminding me very much of that.
Mhm.
Cool.
Going back to a native Pittsburgher.
There's some amazing, and more amazing stories out there. I have this little guy on Grandpa's Beach in Maine, which is based on where we've gone in Maine. But this book sits on the shelf at Sherman's Books up in Bar Harbor, and I went to visit my book, and it's there next to Robert McCloskey. Blueberries for sale. It's so sweet. Yeah, I've gotten so much inspiration, I would imagine, as well, other people from. Actually, I hadn't thought about that till going back to the other one, support books and find characters of books who are going through some of the same things you're going through or have gone through. And just knowing you're not the only person who has ever been or is going through something like that.
That was one of my comments, was that I read.
Yeah.
And read and read, and it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, and I think when you are in a spot that you haven't found yourself in before, oftentimes it's easier to share with a book than it is, or through a book, than it is sometimes to do it personally. Because you are being personal, but it's privately personal, if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely, you don't have to risk.
Yeah.
There's actually, I'm trying to remember when she lived, Jean Stratton Porter, hyphenated last name. And these books came to me through my dad. And she wrote, nature was in everything. The first book was called Freckles, and that's because the main character, Irish and lots of freckles, but this was a young man who came from the city and ended up in a place in Indiana called the Limberlost, swamp and muck, and on the spot learning about nature. Didn't know a thing. I soaked that up, and he goes through a lot of trials. Girl of the Limberlost, similar, the same setting. A young woman who's lives, is immersed in nature, and is looked down on by, let's say, the city folk for her rustic ways. But yeah, I've got lots of support from characters and books.
Someone on Zoom is asking for any book recommendations.
Oh, let me make a note of that and see about putting a list on my website. I think that's possibly the best.
Yeah.
There's the one that pops to mind to me is called Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Sinard,
Yeah.
S-I-N-A-R-D, a botanist, a forester, who through years and years of meticulous research, and despite being told by the forestry industry, sorry, largely male, that this couldn't possibly be true, or findings be true, did prove how trees in particular
Spoke to
communicate
one
with
another.
their roots and share with each other, not even just within the same species, but cross species.
She's phenomenal to hear, too.
Have you seen her in person?
Westchester.
Oh, I wasn't able, I knew she was, I wasn't able to
Yeah,
go that.
a number of years ago, it was
Yeah.
fascinating.
So there are lots of, and if you have any, okay, list of books. The
Brady.
person who asked for a list of books, any particular orientation that you're thinking of?
Marina, feel free to, oh, she says no, okay.
Pam, is the Gene Stratton Porter, is it Gene as in J-E or G?
G-E-N-E. I thought it was a man for a long time, and it's a woman.
Oh, okay.
And Stratton, S-T-R-A-T-T-O-N hyphen P-O-R-T-E-R.
Gotcha.
If you promise to take care of them, they'll let you.
Braiding sweetgrass is another
Oh,
distinguished,
yeah.
but it's really long, but it's great.
Did you find it reads short?
Yeah.
So fascinating,
Yeah,
you just
yeah,
suck
there's
it
so
down.
many little different ways to approach it, it's just a great book.
Yeah, the content, and she's a beautiful writer, I think. Robin Kimmerer, with
Yeah.
2 N's.
Yeah.
Is another one, Life at the Crossroads of Science, Nature, and Spirit.
Mhm.
Miranda Lynn Haupt, G-U-P-T.
There's another one. Oh, my God, people have been giving me books lately, and they're still sitting on the shelves, because I've been writing a lot. Night Magic. Night Magic, that's a beautiful one. Going out at night and all that, I mean, it's beyond fireflies, way beyond fireflies, that I found fascinating. There's one I can't remember the title of, it has to do with vision, which is another whole fascinating.
Okay, so for the benefit of people on Zoom and watching this video later, how can they get a hold of your book, Listening to Nature's Voice? What's the best way?
You can just pop on to Amazon. You can go to my website, and there's 2 options. I know not everybody, myself included, necessarily wants to be buying through Amazon. So on my website, there's another opportunity. My friend Eileen out in Washington clued me into bookshop.org. Everybody all right? So that's another place, and that goes through a different publishing house completely. It goes through Ingram Spark, which has nothing to do with Amazon. They have it at Reeds and Company, and if you got it there, that would be sweet. They were nice enough to put it on their shelves.
Does the library have a copy of this book?
You can buy it at Reed's, yeah.
You can, I have copies here, and $10 gets
And we
it
can
on
buy them
the
directly off your website too.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Pam, for being here tonight.
Oh, wow.